Hello there and welcome to my Arty Corner. My name's Angela Porter, also can be found as Artwyrd. That's word, W-Y-R-D, and it's all one word around on social media. I'm an artist, particularly a colouring book artist or illustrator, depending on how you view the work I do. But a lot of the time, outside of that, I just draw for sheer pleasure. And I love pattern, I love organic things, I love whimsy, I love kawaii cuteness, and I'm inspired by all kinds of things, from architecture to nature to ornamentation and pattern. It can be anything, just things from imagination, archaeology, all sorts of things, illustrated or illuminated manuscripts. You know, I'm sure it all features somewhere in my work. And of course, I sort of like resonate somewhat with Zentangle, but I tend to take things off in my own direction anyway. But I do love patterns. So after my little blurb there, I'd like to say thank you so much for joining me. And if you're a subscriber, thank you so much, especially all the new ones who've joined recently. You are most welcome here. And if you like what I do, then please consider subscribing. It doesn't cost you anything at all to do that, but all that it does is it lets YouTube know that, well, this is my understanding, lets YouTube know that you like this, so people who like the same kind of channels that you like may like this one as well, and they just help to share it. Because a big function of what I do here is that I try to inspire, encourage, and make sense of things, give you help and advice from my perspective. This is my way of doing things, and that may or may not gel and resonate always, sometimes, or it may just go, nope, this is how I do things, this is my way, I like what you're doing, I'm going to watch, because there's always something to learn. It's entirely up to you. So thank you so much. Oh yeah, and I was a teacher for 28 years, so teaching in inverted commas, showing, demonstrating, both as a science teacher, and I did spend some time teaching art alongside that, is part and parcel of the process. So hopefully I go slow enough and explain things clearly enough for you to understand. So this morning, what I've got here is I've got a piece of, this is Fabriano toned paper. It's not very thick, but it does have 15% cotton in it, which means that it's a bit tougher than paper this thin would usually be. And to give you an idea of the size, it's about 8¼ inches, which is 21 centimetres, by about, well, not about, 4 inches, which is 10 centimetres, no about on this one. So I'm working on a longer, thinner piece because, well, I feel like it. And this morning I thought, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I went to a website called Zentangle Pattern Generator. Bit of a mouthful. I will do my best to remember to put a link in the description. If I don't, please shout at me and tell me and I'll add one. And this will give you a random tangle from the official Zentangle patterns list. And the one that it gave me was one called Bucky, which I've never done before. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen it. But it involves using a grid, and I'm just thinking that I quite might do something perhaps towards the centre of this, and then add some organic patterns to either side. So I'm using an 03 fine liner here. Hopefully, there we go. You'll be able to see what I'll do. I'll try and hold my pen so you can. And I'm going to not do a very regular grid. I'm going to have it all wibbly and wobbly because I'm a wibbly wobbly kind of person today. I was with people last night for an hour or so, just a little over an hour, doing a kind of talk. So not to do with art or anything else. But I am actually quite introverted. I can talk in front of people, I can do that. I put my public speaker or my teacher hat on and the world's fine and well again, which is, you know, how I am. But dear goodness, I've got an introvert hangover this morning. I'm headachy, I'm tired, I couldn't come up with an idea for this myself, so hence looking on. I thought, I'll go and look at tanglepatterns.com, and I thought, no, I'm going to get overwhelmed by the choice. Let's find a random pattern generator kind of thing, tangle pattern, and see if there's one comes up I haven't done before. So I've not done this one, and to be honest with you, I'm beginning to have doubts that I should have really used a wibbly wobbly grid. But there we are, we got a wibbly wobbly grid, so let's go with it. It'll work. Now for this one, the next thing you need to do is we need to split these into triangles, so into half, but it's every single one. So I'm going to try and draw these as straight lines going through the these wobbly squares, and I may, as you can see, I'm even bending the line in the middle. As I say, this could be a recipe for total disaster, but we'll see where we go. What's the worst that's going to happen? I erase this video and I start again. I'm sure this will be relatively easy to do on a square grid. So the steps will be the same, and the step out you can find on the Zentangle newsletter. But I did find the link to that through tanglepatterns.com, because I thought I'd go there and have a look and see if they had a deconstruction I could follow, and they sent me there, which is fine. I have no problem with that at all. So the next step for this is, if I turn this back this way, we've got lots of triangles, and what we need to do is to put a triangle kind of in the centre of the a triangle, a nice bold dot in the centre-ish of each of these triangles. It doesn't have to be exactly in the centre. I've got a partial triangle here on the ends, but I'm still going to pop it in the centre or towards the centre of these. So this will just take me a moment to do, but I'm not sort of like stopping and thinking, oh, where is exactly the centre of this? I'm just going, that'll do. And to be honest with you, this morning my head is hurting so much, and it's not from alcohol because I don't drink, but it's quite a common thing for introverts when we've been sociable, even for a short while, it can drain, and feels like you've had an awful lot of alcohol the next day. Well, without the icky, sicky feeling anyway, just that horrible headache. It will pass, and my experience is that painkillers actually don't help. As long as it doesn't develop into a full-blown migraine, I'll be fine. So I've got lots of dots here. Now this next bit should be relatively easy. Once you've done the first one, I'm sure it will be, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to join the dots in hexagons. So I've done the upper part of a hexagon. I'm going to do the sides here and here, and then the lower point is going to be here. So this is my first building block, if you like, and then I can draw another hexagon like this, and so. And as I'm beginning to understand this pattern, I could actually put the zigzags in, then the lines going down, and then the zigzags underneath. But I think I'm going to stick to just drawing one hexagon at a time, because this grid is so wibbly wobbly, I could get confused quite easily along the way. Now I'll come back and deal with the bits on the edge after I've finished all of these. So the next hexagon, I've got the lower part there, so I need to draw the line here, this one here, and then down here and up. So I've got a very strange shaped hexagon here, but that's fine, that's going to happen. It's a wobbly pattern. Once you've got the first row in, the next ones go a lot quicker because it becomes a bit more obvious where you need to put things in. So it's, you know, I just feel the zigzags are my key. Oh, I've got a pentagon there. That's not very good, is it? I'm going to have a very strange shape here. I've just gone and created something very bizarre here, and I'm not quite sure what I've done wrong. I do. It should have gone there. So I've got that line as a mistake, but it will disappear, I'm sure, into this pattern. So once you see it, you'll understand why I'm going to say that. So I'll finish that zigzag there. I'll put the down line in, up, down, 2 zigzags, down, like chevron patterns, isn't it? Down, and I'll connect that one. So along the edge, we need to think about how these would connect. So up here somewhere, there would be another line, because that would create the bottom part of a hexagon, as would this. The next line here, we'd have one going up and one going down. So this one would be down as well. All of these would be actually like so. Here, this one would be going down to create, going towards the hexagon that would be off the page there. This one too. Then this goes down and up there. This one goes this way, this way, this way. I've actually noticed if I turn it, we're actually drawing straight lines again. So I now have, apart from this weird triangle that's appeared there, I'm actually not quite sure what I'm going to do there, because I've got a hexagon and a hexagon. I've got a triangle stuck in the middle. So I don't know what I've done wrong there. I've done something wrong, but I can't. Oh, I know. It's that line there is that's the wrong one, because then that makes a very strange. That's it. There we go. So the next step of this is, if I can see, I'm trying to fathom this one out, because I can see the deconstructions, but I can't quite see how the next section has happened. So I'm having a look on my screen. Okay, so this is how to confuse everybody completely. So what we're going to do here is, inside of this, so I'm going to take this one hexagon here, and then with this one hexagon I'm going to draw another hexagon inside it that connects the lines in the middle of these sections. Confused yet? Oh yeah. But I'm only going to work on one hexagon at a time. Then I'm going to aura these corners outwards, so that we're creating this lovely hexagon-y shape. We're also filling that in to define these corners. And then, if I'm reading this right, what we do next is we just fill this in by auraing inside this. So we're drawing ever decreasing hexagons. Now on the I actually think it might be. It's hard to see. It does look almost like it's a spiral, but it's not. And if it was a spiral, it would still end up looking pretty much like this. So I've got to the centre here, and what I'm going to do for my sanity, although this isn't in the, I don't think it's in the official one, I could be wrong. Yeah, for my sanity, I'm going to fill this in right at the centre with black, because that will help me identify at least one of these hexagons. Now then, also for my sanity, I'm going to take care of this weird one here. Okay. That'll be straight and that'll be there. And then I'm just going to pop the corners in before I do anything else. Because if I don't do something about this one, it's going to bug me totally. So from this one to that one is a straight line, right? Okay. So I'm going to start auraing inside this. It will get easier, I think, as I get these lines in. This one could be more of a splat than a hexagon because it is such a strange shape. But I think this is where I'm going to go. Right, that's it. That's the closest I can get to a hexagon here. So I'm just going to fill this one in. In fact, I may just... That's better. We've got a bit more of a point there, so it looks a bit more of a hexagon shape. There we are. So the rest should be relatively easy. I definitely have not made it easy for myself by drawing a wobbly grid pattern, but at the same time I think it'll work out fine, because things do have a habit of working out in Zentangle, don't they? So there wasn't a video yesterday. Today's Friday, I think it's the 9th. Yes, it's the 9th of September. It doesn't seem that long ago. It was the 1st. Absolutely bonkers. Oops. That'll be fine. I've made a mess there, because I'm trying to draw regular shaped hexagons and it's just not happening. And yesterday I had to focus on getting the drawing for my next colouring book that'll be the cover inked in, and I need to add colour to it as well. I really have botched this. It'll be fine. It'll disappear into the realms of everything else. So I had to focus on doing that. So I didn't know how much time I'd have left in the day. Once I'd done that, the answer is not a lot. So not enough to video and process and upload and let it process. So sometimes things like that do take precedence, because it's a paid gig, as it were. And I'm quite happy with what's been done, as are the publishers. So over the next couple of days, by Monday afternoon my time, Monday morning their time, I need to get the coloured version off to them. And colouring does take me a long time to do, even digitally, because I'm such a faffer with it. And I'm not always that good with colour to begin with. It may take me a while to get into the colour mojo, but we shall see. It's actually, I think, going to be quite a fun book to do. And no, I'm not going to tell you what the theme is. They like to keep it quiet until they announce it at trade shows or conventions or whatever it is. And for the cover to be on, websites, book selling websites and so on, which is fine. I can live with that. But it does cause some intrigue. When yesterday we had, like the day before actually, we've had thunder and lightning, and yesterday the rain was absolutely torrential at times. We say, sort of like raining stair rods. Stair rods are the posts that you have underneath a banister on a set of stairs. And the rain was like that. It wasn't drips, it was just constant streams, which is lovely, except it's not doing much for the drought we have here in Wales, because when rain's that heavy, it just flows off the land and it doesn't go into the reservoirs. A lot of it goes into the, wastewater system, the off-road flow, or, the flow that goes off roads and so on. And it'll end up in rivers that then go down to the sea as well. It doesn't sink into the ground, which is what's needed. And for it to filter its way down into the rivers that feed the reservoirs high up in the mountains. So, yesterday they announced that Wales officially is in a drought. So we've had a very dry spring, a very hot summer, and so what that means in terms of restrictions on water use yet, I don't know. Don't think anything's been announced for my area as such yet. But it's just that, sort of like watch out, Autumn might be here, but it doesn't mean that the drought's over. We need a lot of rain to fill the reservoirs up, and the right kind of rain. Because, it has to be gentle enough that it'll saturate the ground, and prolonged enough that it will not just saturate the ground, but there'll be enough then to make its way into the reservoirs. You can tell I'm a scientist, can't you? I know these things. Environmental pollution scientist. So this is not as awkward as I thought it would be, but it's still a bit tricky as far as patterns go, but it is just working with it as I'm doing. I think I've got the right approach, is doing it just one hexagon at a time. And I do think these blacker sections in the middle really are helping me to focus on which is a hexagon and which isn't. But I would say, for your sanity, if you're not into patterns that are absolutely bonkers like this one, and it is a tad on the crazy side, let's be honest, then do this on a straight, fairly, irregular kind of grid pattern, and see where it leads you. Because I suspect you'll find it a lot easier on a straight grid. It's quite an interesting pattern, though. I can see why they've called it Bucky, I think. Because what comes to my mind is there was a scientist, chemist I think he was, called Buckminster Fuller. I think it was Robert Buckminster Fuller. And perhaps he was a mathematician, but he worked with all of these amazing three-dimensional shapes. And he eventually, I don't know whether it was him or somebody else, worked out, Oh yeah, I think his maths allowed the creation of things like geodesic domes, which is where you have geometrical shapes put together to create a dome. So tiles that automatically dome together. And there's actually an organic chemical named after him, which is Buckminster fullerene. But there's a whole class of them now called fullerenes that are based on these geodesic grids almost. And they're very useful organic chemicals because their properties are a bit different to the usual ones. Although, I don't think I'm sure they've worked out what to do with them. It's just that I just don't keep up with science. So I can see how this has been called Bucky, because the Buckminster fullerene molecules were lovingly referred to by chemists, including myself, as buckyballs, because they looked like soccer balls. They were very ball-shaped, even though they were made out of these geodesic patterns. And so calling this Bucky actually makes sense. And I haven't read the blurb that goes with this on the Zentangle newsletter, because I had this pattern chosen for me at random on the website I mentioned, which name I've already forgotten. Then it may have been something to do with that, which is why it's called Bucky. Because I know that Rick often talks about, having watched the videos, or a lot of the videos, talks about, geometry and patterns and so on a lot. And so may have stumbled upon that. So I think you're getting the idea of this. So what I'm going to do is I am going to finish this one, and then I'm going to go and finish the rest off the best that I can, and I will come back and have a look at how I'm going to complete the rest of this tile, because this is a bit of a dense pattern in terms of straight lines, but also in terms of ink and so on. And adding shadow and highlight to it will certainly help, as will other things. So for you it'll be no time, but for me it could be a while. But I'll see you shortly. Okay, I'm back because the corners and the edges can be a little bit tricky, and I've also got a little hint or tip here that might help if you're doing a crazy kind of grid like this. It can really help if you've got a perfectly straight line, which I don't think I've got anywhere here, between the centre of one and another. But if you bend it just to give yourself a little bit more space on these corners, you can fill those in quite nicely. And the hexagon in between will work out. Around the edges we have got half hexagons. So I'm just going to quickly fill this one in. But the corners, there's two different kinds of corners. So in between the corners it's relatively easy to work this out. So one kind of corner is this one, where we need to think about where these lines are going, here and here. Ignore this one, I've managed to mess up in the corner. So I'm just going to go over this, here and here. It's kind of working out where the half areas will be, and we get just sort of like two pieces of the six-sided hexagon pie in this corner. In this corner it will make more sense if I just fill, this one in. You can see by bending this I've given myself a little space just to pop a line in there just to create, and the fact these lines are a little bit curved doesn't make much difference in the grand scheme of things. So again, I am going to just fill this in. This pen isn't in the best of shape, but I'm sticking with the same pen for the whole of this. So can you see there how I bent that to give myself that little bit extra space there, and I'm going to do the same here. And we can just fill that in quite nicely, and here. And then I'm just going to carry on auraing them until I get down to a shape that I can call basically half a hexagon. Then what I've got here is essentially that line that would join the middle of a line together, but then we just aura it down. So that's the easiest corner to do. In fact, if anything, it's the easiest part of this pattern. So the last part I've got, oops, as I do it wrong again. That's what happens when you talk with an introvert hangover. But it will work out, is this little section here. Fill that one in. And don't forget that some of these lines here will be from the original construction. So there's going to be a lot of lines going on, and it's very easy to get confused, as I've done quite often here. But that is the completed pattern. You can see where the lines become very dense. Now then, the next thing I want to do is these little corners here, where I put those dots, I want to convert them into little triangles, because they will help to anchor the corners that little bit more. And will make a bit more sense, hopefully. I may not be able to find all of them. That's not one there. But if you can, I think by turning them into clear triangles, they will make some sense. And I think you can by sort of trying to find the original hexagons. It's not always easy though. And a lot of these have actually turned themselves into triangles. But I just think that will help to neaten up some areas of this pattern that weren't very neat to begin with, perhaps. And add that extra bit of repeating pattern and structure here. So I'm looking around at these for them, and I may miss one or two. I think it's going to be really helpful to do these in this rather messy region here, where lines are all so close together and overlapped a bit. So okay, there's one there. There's definitely one here. These will be a lot easier to see in a regular kind of grid. So this is the first time I've done this pattern. And naturally, of course, I don't go for easy, do I? Oh, don't be silly. That wouldn't be an Angela way, would it? Okay, there's this one here. There's one there. I think I'm nearly close to having found them all. It's an optional thing, I guess. It depends how you like the look of it, but I think I just need to tidy some of these areas up, especially as my pen work isn't the greatest today. And I am going to call introvert hangover as my excuse for that one, because boy, does my head hurt. And as I've said, I know that painkillers just won't help. So I'm just going back and adding some love, just tidying some bits up here and there just where I can, just to get this. There's one there. There's actually one there which I missed those ones, but they'll help to tidy all of that up. That'll tidy that. Just sit back and have a good look, and that makes some kind of sense of it. It's a completely crazy pattern. Next time I'll remember not to make it so close down here. It's just, it is how it's worked out, but it's going to be fine. In fact, I think one of those might be an error line. Okay, so I'll come back and do something about the shadow and highlight in a little while. What I'm going to do first, though, is I'm going to aura the edge on both sides, and I'm going to use that as an opportunity to kind of neaten this up a bit as well. I am colouring over into the pattern because I've done a misstroke, and I will do the same on the other edge. This always just makes things feel that little more finished and polished to my mind, and it gives a bit of space between this pattern and what I'm going to do next. Because next I definitely want to change up, or change. So I've got this habit of saying change up or switch up. It's not a Britishism, it must be from watching lots of American videos. But I do want to have a bit of a change here. Now, where is it? I had my book. I know I had my book. I know it was here somewhere. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I've got my little brown book of goodies. This is my book where I keep all of my patterns in. And I do want to use something that, oh, that's interesting. I don't know if you can see that one. I haven't used that one before. These are seed heads from snapdragons. So these are all taken from plants, and mostly plants, I think, that you see under a microscope. Microscopic images or close-up views, macro views. Poppy seed head of a kind. So some of these have been stylised and adapted by me. But I love things like this. I'm just looking for something. I've done these ones before. So I think, let me have a look. Would these go? No, I don't think so. But I think I do know what would be quite nice. Because what I'm going to do is, I've got this line here. I'll just come back over this way a little bit, and I'm just going to bring it underneath. I'm going to have it swooping out, and I'm also going to give it a double line. So I want to kind of have this one almost appearing to go through the middle. I'm then going to pop a little stack of little beads here. So 1, 2, 3, and then on the top I'm going to draw a nice big circle, and in the middle of this I'm going to draw another circle, but I'm actually going to add a flower in there. Okay, so we'd have one that would come from over here. So I'm going to have these weaving above and behind each other. And again, I'm just going to pop this stack of 3 on. I'll add that as like a little bulb. Again, draw the flower in. I'm not going to count petals. Some will have 4, some 5 or 6. It's not important. I'm going to draw another one here. Again, I'm just going to draw the stem in. add my 3 topping pieces there. And for a bit of variety, I've put the centre of the flower off-centre to that circle, but that means that I can change the shape of the petals to add some interest then. Let's do this one. Maybe not overlapping, but perhaps coming back towards it. So I'll add 3 bits on the top. I'm going to add my circle here, which will go behind, so we are getting that dimension. I'll draw the centre of the flower to one side, and then I'll do this. I've got a couple more here which I can muck around with a bit, so I'll do this one first. And I'm going to pop the 3 there. You can see I've put pencil lines in here as a guide to how far I would like the border to be. And I did use a ruler to do that. Because the last time I worked on paper with these edges, and when it was a bit wonky, it looked wonky even when it wasn't wonky. Or it looked wonkier when it was slightly wonky, so I'm just going to pop one in here. I haven't quite managed to get these 2 on either side. Kind of matched up, but that's fine. So I've got these going on, and what I can do then is I'm just going to look where there are other lines here and start to draw some smaller shapes up here that perhaps would be similar, but not necessarily exactly the same. Starting to fill the gaps in. Or perhaps they will be exactly the same. So let's have a look here about so that one's beginning to look a bit more full. But there are still things I can do with these spaces where I've got them, or where the weaving here has given me these little spaces between, which is quite fun. And I think we'll have one that goes up here. Like so. So I've got plenty of interest going on around here. And what I am going to do for these is I am going to draw this line in ink, so I've got a defined border, as it were. And yet some of them are growing outside of it, and that's all to the good, because it makes life interesting. But by putting this in, I'm also defining these spaces that there are in between these. I've got the bottom part here, which I could do the same with, but I'm not sure yet. I'll leave that because, I mean, I could always just cut this off or whatever, but we'll have a look now. I'm going to add rounding as I go along here rather than doing it all in one go. Or actually, perhaps we can do it all in one go. because it doesn't take that long just to touch these things up. Don't forget to do where these different motifs kiss each other. And if you've got a little gap there that's too small to fuss around with, just fill it in with black. It'll work fine. Don't forget to do this on the where these lines overlap and meet, as well as at the bottom. It just feels like they're connected in some way, almost like they've been welded or soldered on like stained glass. It's one of my favourite things. Okay, we're nearly done. There. Don't forget these lines that come from the border. That's a little bit small, as is that one, so I'm just going to fill those in. And look at that, practically all done. Oops, that's okay, it'll be fine. So here in this section, I am going to add, I think, I've been using an awful lot of Muka lately, haven't I? So, but it would look rather nice in here as perhaps as a slightly different form of Muka, perhaps with leaves on the top instead of the circles. It's still a kind of Muka, but so here I could have the other side of this leaf behind like that. And I am just going to put that centre in, but not actually as if it's touching the tip and going down, just almost like a little crease in it. And that can be brought out with shading and so on. So let me have a look. Because these leaves will happily grow in all kinds of directions. Part of me thinks I should be drawing the leaves in first and then adding the stem afterwards, which always works as well. So we've got that there. And the colour and so on will help to bring these out. So let me just pop my leaves in first. And then I can add the stem. That works a bit better because I can make sure the leaves go where I would like them to go. Finagling that one in, but it works. Bit of a heavy hand there with the crease in the middle, but it works all the same. So let's have a look. That one worked nicely, and I'm sure that I can get another one in there like that. Here I think we may have one that goes all the way to the top there. It's only a small one, but I can live with small ones as well. And then perhaps another one that is bigger that goes behind that section here. Again, it's emphasising the over and under, isn't it? The weaving that we've got going on here. And this is a lovely space to add one. Just one. One very big and bold. I could carry on. In fact, I think it'd be quite nice if we could have perhaps one that follows that there. That worked quite nicely. And I might just pop a little one in that will go behind that as well. So that's filled some of those spaces in. Where I haven't got these, Like, I'm not going to try and fit some in other places. This one is going to stick out behind that one there. So these other spaces, I can either leave them as they are, or I could fill them with something like tipple or orbs. Orbs would be quite nice in this one, I think, because we can get them stacked one behind another. Like so. And that is always a nice thing to do, and it always adds that kind of bulging dimension. So I'll do another one. So I draw the centre one, and then the others, it's almost like I'm tacking them in behind. And there's little gaps around the edge, so I just go back and fill them in this way. And that will work for any shape. So we've got a bit of an awkward shape here, but that's fine. We'll put one big orb in, and then that one there could be a teeny tiny one at the top. The bottom one could be a bit slopey. It's all fine. It always works. So we've got these happening. Even in this section, where it goes very small towards the top here, all you do is you just make the orbs a little bit smaller and just try to tuck them in as best as you can. So that's working quite nicely. And this one. Now it's unlikely I'm going to finish this here and now, because I am aware that this is going to be another long video, and I know that many of you enjoy long videos, certainly if you've stuck it out here, but I think 2 or 3 hours just to finish this drawing might be a bit much. So what I'm going to do now is, while I've got this, is I'm going to have a look at how I could add shadow and highlights to this. Now I'm looking for, I want a pencil here. I want Chinese ink. So, excuse me, I'm going to grab I've got my pot of Inktense here, and I'm looking for a specific Inktense pencil. I've got Iron Green, that's the one I wanted. And I've also got my white charcoal pencil, which I'll use for highlights. So here, this is really interesting how I could make this work, but I'm not entirely sure I know how to. It's quite a complicated pattern, but what I think I'd do is I'd look along the edges of each of these hexagons if I'm going to get really complicated. You know where those triangles are? That's kind of the key, I think, to where we're going to pop these. This paper isn't really designed for using wet media on, but I think I should be able to get away with a tiny bit of water, which is why I've got a water brush here, because I know this one will allow me to allow this to flow. So I am just going along the edges here. Very quickly, just putting some of this colour down, focusing on where the triangles are more than anything. And already I think I can see some structure coming out of this in a weird way. This is a bit like it's been stretched, pulled and stretched and squashed, which is fun to me, but it's a pain It's been a pain to work with, I must admit, but I've got there in the end. But say, you know, don't think you have to do something as crazy as I've just done here on your first go with a pattern that looks really complex, and yet the steps to it are really quite simple. It's all about auraing. The construction of the shapes were the difficult part. I do have to say that. But once we've got there, it's not so bad. So I'm not going to add water to all of these, but I think you'll get the idea of how this is going to look just by me adding the pencil in around each of these shapes. So that's beginning to add some shadow already. Just need to get this, yeah, there's plenty of water in here. I was just checking I have water. So I'm just going to activate the Inktense with the water and just allow it to spread just a little bit. In fact, if anything, I've got too much water flowing here, but I think it'll be fine. I don't want to fill all of these sections with Inktense. I want to keep it round the edge where the shadows would be, where I've put it, but I do want to pull it up towards the middle just a bit so we get some lighter colour there. She says not going to do everything, but you can see how it just helps to bring that colour. Bearing in mind I am going to be putting highlight around that dark centre there. So I'm not fussing around with this. This goes against my grain, but I was watching a Tim Holtz video earlier today. He's got some distress pencils out, watercolour pencils. And one of the things he was saying is, you know, you have to, you know, let go of yourself, stop being yourself. You know, don't be so far up yourself, as it were, and work with things and just see what happens. And I like the idea of not being so precious about colouring and so on in some ways. Because here I'm adding this more as a shadow than I am trying to get a really good representation of any kind of shape or form. I'm really just trying to get the darkness down around those triangular parts and perhaps a bit of colour into the rest of the pattern, but that's not critical. So if it's not even all the way around, I'm going to work with it as it is. So this is a bit of a departure for me because I'm usually very, very controlled about colouring and adding colour. But perhaps not today. Perhaps we're just going to go with the flow and see what happens and work with watery media as if it's watery and flowy, and like rivers, you know, you can control them, but they don't like it very much. They will find a way to burst their banks and erode things away. So let me just help it do that before I try to shove things in places that I don't really want them or don't need to be so fussy about. There are some places I think I've missed with pencil, but there's enough of the Inktense on the brush to actually fill those areas in with colour, and if I need a bit more, once this is dried, I can always add a bit more. So by doing it this way, I'm trying to stay away from the edge of the, you know, not to go outside the edge of this pattern, but within the pattern. It's just wherever my brush takes the colour, keeping it darkest, as I say, towards the edge of these hexagons, towards those triangles, and lighter around the top. And I think already that's brought some highlight out here. The paper has buckled a little bit because it's going to do that when it's wet, but already I quite like what I can see here. Now for these I'm going to do exactly the same along these little perks around the edges, just to add shadow on either side, and then I will come back with the white charcoal to add highlights, I think. So I want to leave an area towards the middle that doesn't have much colour on. I want to keep it quite intense towards the edges. Back of my hand, because I haven't got any tissue to hand to actually wipe off any excess colour. Luckily it washes off, even though it's permanent on paper and so on. And I do love Inktense. They are so fabulous. I love the way the colour brightens up and becomes really intense, as its name says. Okay, for these, I'm going to put the Inktense on, or just around that little black area on this leaf. Notice I've only got the one colour out. I'm going to try and keep this fairly monochrome. And I picked a green because I knew the green would go with the background, which is what I wanted. I'm going to try and keep things monochrome because I know when I go for different colours, things can all go to pot. Totally. So I am adding some colour to the stem, but nowhere near as much as is around that centre bit. I may need to come back to the centre bits actually and add some darkness there. Because I think I'm spreading it out a bit thin, you know, a bit too much, but we'll have a look. And I find a water brush is so convenient. But also you get, if you've got it set up right, you've got a really decent one. They really do control the flow of water, and that you don't need to worry about having too little or too much of the variation in it, because it will mostly be the same. You sometimes do need to give them a bit of a squeeze to encourage them, but you can squeeze gently or as hard as you like, and that affects then the amount of water that appears on the tip. And it also means I don't have a jar of water on my desk, which I'm apt to do horrendous things with, like spill, which is never a good thing. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking some colour directly from the tip of the pencil, and I'm just using that to add the shadows where I've lost them, as it were, around this middle bit. I do want to try to get that shadow to extend a little bit away from it towards the top and down, so it does look a bit more like we've got a fold there. I may not completely achieve that because I am rushing just a tad, but sometimes rushing rather than overthinking and overworking is the way to go, because you can overthink and overwork these very much. Okay, so we're beginning to get some things going on here. For these, I think I'm going to add the shadows towards the edge and towards the left, and keep the right and top lighter, so that it's like we've got that shadow down here, as if they're in shadow. Again, if we do the same to each and every one of them, it doesn't matter where the light source is, it's just adding that pattern to them. Again, I'm just using the tip of my Inktense pencil here as if it's a paint block. So just able to pick up a little bit, and it doesn't damage the Inktense at all, or the actual thing. Once it's dried, it's perfectly fine. The one thing I do is that once I've finished with it, I leave the tip to dry completely before I add it back to the pot of all the others, just in case tips touch and colour gets crossed over one with another, which we don't want. So you can see how this is beginning to build up nicely. For these stems, I am going to make them quite dark at the top, but quite light at the bottom. And these little balls, they're going to be, I say balls, these bits of the stem are going to be quite dark on one side, and then I'm just going to hopefully get them a little darker to the left again. So I'll do that on this one. I'll just pick a bit of colour up. I'll fill that in with all that colour, and then I'll just come back on the edges and add a hint of darkness. I don't mind having that edge there. So you can begin to get how I'm going to do that. Flowers I'll come back to. This is now dry, and so for this I am going to add white around this central hexagon, and I have got a paper stump here, so I can actually spread that out, and it also helps to disguise my sloppy addition of colour here by helping to smudge over that and create a kind of glow almost around these bits. It is very glowing now, isn't it? But it does lift them up. Let me just go here again. I'll just do a couple more of these and you'll get the idea. And whether you do them one at a time or you do a number of them together. The other thing this will do is that it will help to disguise my misstrokes, my pen strokes, or my errors like here. It won't make them disappear entirely, but it just will blur them a little. Which is what I want. And this one, I'm not going to go back in with a black pen to crisp up the lines underneath the white chalk, because I do want it to look like there's an intense light that is blurring them as well. It's almost like it's glowing up between them and shining on them. I may go back and do something about the inner black hexagon. Perhaps just do a couple more so we can just add some more on this one. There wasn't a lot of chalk there. I say I'm trying to keep the chalk away from the inner hexagon, because I don't really want that one to be blurred. This one is getting that way, but that's what the black pen is for afterwards. Of course I am rushing and I'm not turning my paper much. So you're starting to get the idea here of what I'm trying to achieve, I suppose. Or my thinking here. This isn't the only way of adding shadow and highlight, but it just seemed the right way to do it today. And my brain isn't thinking on what the alternatives could be. So that really does, wow, that's mad. I'm going to say that is mad. Okay, for these ones, I'm going to pop a highlight down the centre, and I'm going to curve it as it needs to, and I'm going to smudge it out from side to side. And yeah, it might go over the black lines, but there's not so many of them here that I don't mind going over them if I feel it's necessary. So we've got those there, so that really does help with the dimension with those. For these leaves, I think I might just pop some along one side as if they're just catching some light. So let's have a look, because I can always add more to another side if I wish. Come back and add more, especially once I've sharpened my pencil. So let's have a look here. Let's just encourage that into the paper as well. What this does, as well as smoothing out the colour, it actually helps the particles of the charcoal, as with the graphite pencil or any kind of soft pastel, it helps them to sink into the paper fibres, so they get held on and they're less likely to smudge much. But they will still smudge, so careful handling's needed. So we've got these. I am going to add a little bit of chalk at the top of these ones just to brighten that up a little bit, and I'm also going to put some in the centre. Rather than adding colour, I'm just going to add white in here, because I just think that will be quite nice. I can then add some of the green to the petals, which I'll do briefly, quickly to show you what I'm thinking. But you can see that just that little bit of chalk, it just adds that little bit of a glow almost, which I quite like. Okay, so last thing, because this is going to be a heckishly long video, I'm just going to pop some colour around here quite a lot, and then I'm going to blend this out so the flowers have just got that hint of colour, and I may just come back and add some more later on, or little highlights, I don't know. There we go. So this is where I am at the moment with this. I'm going to put it on the side because you can see it all. I'm not sure, does it all fit on this way? Yes, it will. I don't think I put the, no, I did put the light on. But you can see how it's beginning to build up. So some interesting patterns here. Not quite sure. I'm going to see what the length of the video is and decide what to do. So you may see it in its entirety or in parts, or not at all, depending on life, the universe and everything. But I'm just going to say thank you very much for joining me this morning or today or evening or whenever it is that you do. And I hope you found this one an interesting one. It's a bit unusual. We'll see how it goes. So until I speak to you again, take care. Ta-ra for now. Bye. Oh, and don't forget to be creative. Ta-ra.